What's up, everyone? Criddle here, and I want to talk about stat allocation, stat distribution, what the best stats are for different classes, what your starting stats are for different races based on the class that you want to play, things like that. I'm getting a lot of questions in my chat during my stream, and I figured I would just make a YouTube video to kind of go over it. I'm not going to say that this is going to be the be-all, end-all, all the math is done and everything like that. So if you have any suggestions or different opinions, or maybe a little bit more about the math than I do, please comment down below. Let us all know what those stats are doing differently, or how they help out, or how they benefit you more. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about are the stats that everyone needs. Everyone except for maybe a cleric. That is going to be your dexterity. So believe it or not, hit rating is huge for everyone, not just melee classes or physical damage classes. So dexterity with hit rating increases your chance to even land spells. So you want to increase your dexterity. So I would say this is the most important stat in the game for just about everyone. I also think it's important for clerics, because clerics need to be able to hit the mobs so that they can get their prayerful combat to be able to proc their mana regen a little bit more, so they have mana in combat. So I'm going to say that dexterity and hit rating, you can get hit rating directly on items. You can see here I have 30 hit rating on my plate gauntlets. So just depending on which one is going to increase your accuracy more. So the more hit rating you have, the more dexterity you have, your accuracy will go up. Now, do you want to just focus on dexterity? No, I don't believe so. You do want to focus on dexterity until you are hitting the mobs that you're fighting consistently. Once you are hitting the mobs you're fighting pretty consistently, that's where you're going to basically hit the point of diminishing returns, and you no longer need to put points into dexterity. So if you're fighting, blue, light blue, green mobs, you don't need as much dexterity because you're going to be hitting them more often. But if you're fighting yellow mobs or orange mobs, or trying to fight a red mob, then you probably want higher dexterity or higher hit rating. Those two things will definitely help you hit those more often. So that is dexterity. Everyone, I think, needs that, especially physical damage dealers, because they're going to get the increased crit rating. That crit rating is going to increase your crit chance, and higher crit chance means more crit, and more crit means more damage. So pretty much every DPS, physical DPS class wants to go a lot into dexterity. Next up, we're going to talk about stamina. Stamina is the only stat in the game that really doesn't have any type of diminishing returns. You get X amount of health per point of stamina. I know as a warrior, I get, I believe, 15 health per stamina. No matter how much stamina I get, it does not seem to end, so I can just keep putting more points into stamina, and I just keep getting more and more and more health. So this is another stat that everybody should get up to a certain point. If you're a tank, you obviously want to get as much stamina and as much health as possible. So I would recommend that. Now, stamina up to a certain point for things like spellcasters, things that have low health. The reason for that is because there are a lot of AoEs in the game. There's something called a Mana Weaver, for example, that's down in Houndier Cave. There's these cripplings that do an Ice Spike ability. These all do AoE damage, and you don't want to die in case those go off. So that's why you just want to have enough stamina to where you're not dying and able to be healed back up. That's what you're shooting for. Once you get to that point, you don't need to necessarily pump a ton of points into stamina, but I would recommend getting some stamina or plus health items. So, for example, here I have an Iron Breastplate that gives me +3 stamina, plus 15 health. It's a very, very good item for tanking specifically, but it could be something that you may say, hey, I just want to get a little bit more health. I'm going to put it all into one item, get a little bit more health, and then you can allocate stats in other places. So now that we have those two out of the way, because I believe those are the only two stats, in my opinion, that every single class will benefit from, let's talk about the other stats and which ones you are going to need for your class. So if you go down here to your skills, you can look at mine right here. So I have kick. I need strength and constitution to increase the damage of my kick. So let's talk about strength first. So strength is going to increase your damage of some melee attacks. It will not be all attacks. In this case, it'll be all of my auto attack damage, plus it'll be my abilities down here. Now, not every single ability that you have is going to be the same. So like mine are strength constitution, and most of my abilities are strength constitution. But if you look over here, additional modifiers are strength and agility for close the gap. So sometimes you will see some stats that are different based on your class. I know that the wizard, for example, has an ability. It's a direct damage spell ability that uses, I think, strength, constitution, and agility, which is really strange for a wizard because you're probably going to be focusing on intelligence mostly. So you may want to look into those and see how much they actually affect your class directly. So that all said, strength is only going to increase your melee damage of like your auto attacks by about 1 point per like 5 or 6 strength. It takes a decent amount of strength to increase your auto attack damage by any significant amount. So I don't necessarily think that strength is worth putting too much into. I would say more dexterity is probably going to end up being better because you're going to hit the mob more often. But once you get to that point where you're hitting the mob often enough, you're critting what you feel is good enough, then you want to start dumping points into strength if you are a melee class, especially if you are a melee class that uses strength down here. Now, if your skills don't use strength down here, let's say they use something like agility, then you may want to start focusing into agility. So let's talk about agility for a second. I'm specifically leaving Constitution out for last for a reason. So let's talk about agility. Agility is going to increase your dodge chance and your parry chance. This is a really, really good stat for tanks, but pretty much not that great for any other class except for maybe the rogue. I believe Ranger may also have some abilities that increase based on agility. Now, the rogue and the Ranger, I would say, may want to put just more points into dexterity because a lot of their abilities, for the rogue, for example, are going to use agility and dexterity to boost the damage. So you may as well just put more into dexterity, get that more crit rate, get that more hit rate, and increase your damage of your abilities down here more. After that, you may want to put points into strength just to kind of boost that a little bit because you can't just focus on one stat. Most items have 2 or sometimes even 3 stats on them. So if you're a tank, you definitely want to increase your dodge chance and your parry chance. So if we look over here, I have a dodge chance right now of 8.85 and a parry chance of 10, and that is with an agility of 11. If I was focusing on specifically dodging and parrying, I would definitely increase this. And right now, that is the best way to tank in the game because mitigation from your armor class doesn't really work as well as it should, in my opinion. So there you go. Go with dodge and parry. So agility is another really big one for tanks. Not so much for any other class except for maybe the rogue. So let's go down here to intellect. Intellect is obviously very big for arcane casters. Most of their abilities are going to be based on intellect down here. So they're going to increase damage based on that. But it also increases your spell crit chance. So after you get enough dexterity as an int caster to where you're consistently hitting your spells and you're not getting resisted too much, then you want to start looking at your intellect. Increase this, you're going to get increased maximum mana, and you're going to get increase in your crit chance. Another class that actually uses intellect that you wouldn't necessarily think is the Dire Lord. Dire Lord benefits more from intellect than it would from something like strength. So I would say for a Dire Lord, for example, you want to go dexterity and then intellect if you're going damage-wise. If you're trying to tank, you want to go dexterity and agility first, with intellect being kind of your tertiary skill. So that basically covers intellect. Now we're going to talk about wisdom casters. So wisdom casters, that would be your cleric and your shaman right now. This is going to increase their healing for the most part, because if you look down on their healing spells, they have, like, I believe the cleric is wisdom constitution. So you want to maximize your wisdom. Maximizing your constitution, again, we're going to go over constitution more in a minute because it's a wonky one that doesn't really work the way it wants to. Wisdom is going to increase your mana pool. It's going to increase your spell crit. So when you're doing dots and things with your shaman class, you will be doing more crits with that. And then it also increases your heals, because it's just going to increase the amount that you heal every time you cast that spell on somebody. So wisdom is absolutely huge. Again, dexterity to make sure you're landing those spells. You make sure you're hitting with your cleric up to a certain point, and then I would dump as much as you can into wisdom, with making sure that you have enough stamina for those healers. The last one down here is charisma. This is almost exclusively for the enchanter class, but other classes may benefit from them. So look at your skills again down here. Make sure that you may get some damage or something from those. But this charisma increases the duration and ability, I believe, to land your mesmerize spells as an enchanter. So charisma is very, very big on enchanters. I would say that enchanters want to get charisma and intellect almost equally going up. I don't necessarily think that enchanters need a lot of dexterity because they're not really casting a lot of direct damage spells, but somebody may be able to correct me down in the comments. So if you know specifically when they're doing debuffs or things like of that nature, maybe they're interrupts, maybe dexterity helps with that, maybe charisma helps with that. Somebody knows that, definitely let us know. I believe that those debuffs are going to be based on dexterity, but your mesmerize spells are going to be based on charisma. So you're going to want to increase your intellect and your charisma. So that goes over pretty much every stat except for Constitution. So let's talk about Constitution very briefly. Constitution is not a good spell or a good stat for almost anyone. It would be a good stat for tanks because it does increase your armor class, but it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 Constitution equals 1 armor class, and armor class right now is just not that great. You can see that I have like a chest piece here that's got 36 armor on it. I've got 238 total armor class. And I reduce, hits from 30 down maybe 3 points of damage. It doesn't seem very much. And I think that armor class needs to be looked at across the board. I've heard a lot of people say that that's the case. So that said, Constitution doesn't really help out with armor class as much as it should. So the only other thing here is crowd control, damage resilience. This is going to basically be your resistance chance effectively against crowd control type of effects like your fears and mesmerize spells, sleep spells, things of that nature. I believe the way that it works is it increases your chance to potentially resist them or reduces the duration if you get hit by them. Somebody can probably confirm that, but that's what Constitution is going to do. I would say that no one needs to really worry about Constitution except one class, and that is the shaman class. So shamans get increased stats on their buffs when they have high Constitution. Now, I tested this a little bit on a shaman. I have a friend that's a shaman, and we looked at it a little bit, and it doesn't seem to increase it a ton, but it does give you a few more points of stat points. So you could go from like 3 to 4 to your strength ability or to your strength stat with that buff when you cast it on another player. Some of the higher end spells, might increase it from 5 to 7. So you might get an additional 2 strength when you cast that buff on another player. Now, what a lot of people are doing with this is they have 2 sets of gear. You put on a set of gear that has all of your Constitution on it. You then cast your buffs on your party, you maximize their buffs, and then you take off all that Constitution gear and you put on your wisdom gear or whatever other gear that you have, your main group gear that may have your dexterity and your wisdom and your intellect or whatever for your shaman class to be able to hit all those spells and heal better, etc. So basically, Constitution is one of those things where you're not going to have it as your main gear, but you may want to put it on to get buffs. Now, that all said, you may want to look at that for something like the enchanter buffs. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that there's that chaotic imbuement. I haven't been able to test it. I have a couple enchanter friends, but we haven't been able to get together and actually test it out. They have the chaotic imbuement, and then healers also have their heal proc, which I can't remember what it is called off the top of my head right now. But they have the divine favor. They have those 2 abilities that you put onto somebody. Now, I believe, if I'm correct on this, that wisdom will increase divine favor, and I think either charisma or intellect will increase that chaotic imbuement damage proc that goes on your party members. So anyway, that goes over all of the attributes. So a quick rundown of everything. If you're a melee character, you're going to want a melee DPS character. You're going to want dexterity first, strength second, with some stamina kind of interlaced in between. And then check on your skills down here. If you're an int caster, you're going to want dexterity to a point where you're not getting a lot of resist. And then you want to maximize your int with a little bit of stamina to make sure that you don't die. If you are a wisdom caster, that would be cleric and shaman, you're going to want dexterity to make sure that you're landing your hits. Again, wisdom to make sure that you're increasing the amount that you are healing every single spell. And then if you are a tank, tanks want to get dexterity so that they can actually hit the mobs, maintain aggro, and then they want lots and lots of agility to be able to dodge and parry a bunch, and then stamina for pretty much everything else once you are dodge and parrying enough and you're hitting enough. So hopefully that goes over everything. If it does, please like, subscribe, follow, all that kind of stuff. I do stream daily over on Twitch. We're playing a lot of this game right now. So if you have any other questions, please come over and ask, hang out, and say hello. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.